In this video, I'd like to go over the content in this section of the course. This is a very important section since we describe the installation of the tools necessary to create, build, and execute C++ programs. We wanted to make this course accessible to as many students as possible who want to learn C++. So if you're running Microsoft Windows, Mac OS X, or Ubuntu Linux, we have videos detailing the steps necessary to get set up and running on your platforms. The following section includes videos for installing the C++ compiler, the CodeLight IDE, and how to configure the CodeLight IDE for each specific operating system. Then we go over how to create a default CodeLight project template that you can use when you want to create a new C++ project. This makes it really easy to start new projects quickly since all the required settings will be ready to go. In all the videos, we use a real simple C++ program to test the installations. All of the elements of this C++ program will be explained in detail as we progress through the course. In this section, just type along and follow along to ensure that your installation is complete. In addition to using the CodeLight IDE, we want to be sure that students can learn and build C++ programs even though they may not be able to install an IDE due to hardware limitations. So we created a section that uses just a simple text editor and the command line tools to do just that. If you're unable to use an IDE, then please don't let that stop you from learning C++. You can still use the command line just fine. So we created a video for the command line for Windows, for Ubuntu Linux, and for Mac OS X. Finally, we include a video that uses a website that has a C++ compiler available that you can use to write and execute basic C++ programs. This has some limitations, but it's great if you're on the road or away from your own PC. All you need is a web browser, and you can run much of the code presented in this course. As the course evolves, we'd like to include videos for Xcode on Mac, Microsoft Visual Studio on Windows, Eclipse, NetBeans, and other major. We want this to be the most complete beginning C++ course available. In this video, I'll take you through the steps necessary to install the C++ compiler on the Windows operating system. We're going to use the minimalist GNU for Windows. Now, GNU stands for GNU's Not Unix. It's basically a compiler collection called GCC that includes the C compiler, a C++ compiler, a Fortran compiler, and an Ada compiler. Now, we're only going to be using the C++ compiler in this class. So we'll only install that. You open up your favorite browser and you go to mingw.org. You'll see a page similar to this. And what you want to do on this page is click on the button at the top right here called Download Installer. So I'm going to select that. And that'll automatically start a download of the mingw installer. It's a pretty small file, so it should be a quick download depending on your internet connection. Okay, so I'm finished downloading here. And what I want to do is just run that installer. So I'm just going to double click on it and I'll close down the browser. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're basically just going to follow the installation wizard. I'm going to install, and I want to install in C:\mingw. Now, certainly this could be a different drive letter, but don't change the name of the installation directory, and certainly don't put spaces or anything in there. I'd suggest that you just keep the default if you can. Keep all the default settings and press continue. And this will start the download of the installation manager. Now, once the installation manager is downloaded, then we can continue and we can start downloading and installing the actual compiler. Okay, so when the download is complete, you can see that on my system it processed 113 items, and it only took a couple of minutes. I sped up the video so you didn't have to wait through the installation. Once you're finished, just press continue. And now you're going to be shown a window which is the installation manager. Now here, what you want to do is you want to click Basic Setup on the left, and you want to select 3 of these packages on the right. You want to select the msys-base down here at the bottom, and you select Mark for installation. You want to select the mingw32-gcc G++ package. That package contains the C and the C++ compilers. And we'll mark for installation as well. And you want to select the mingw32 base package. And we'll mark that for installation. Now, once you've got those three selected, you can come back up here to the installation menu and press Apply Changes. Now, at this point, we can click Apply, and it's going to download and install the GNU compiler. Okay, so that's the installation. It only took a couple of minutes on my machine. I'll select the close. And at this point, we're done installing the compiler. Now, there's one step that you should take. In this case, is we want to set the path variable on our Windows system to the binary directory. So let me show you how to do that. Open up your control panel. You can open it up down here, or you can open it up right here. I've just got a shortcut on my desktop. And you can search your control panel for env for environment variables. I'll just type env. And you can select Edit the System Environment Variables. Okay, now at this point, you want to come down here to where it says Environment Variables and press that. And then down to System Variables and select the path right there. And you want to edit the path. And what you want to do is you want to add a new variable to the path. So I'm going to select New. And at this point, you want to browse and find the directory where you installed the compiler libraries. So in this case, it was my C drive, and it was the min.gw directory, and you want to go to the bin subdirectory and select that. That's where the binaries are, the executable files, and then press OK. And OK one more time, and just finish off and close everything up. That's it. The compiler system is now installed, and we're ready to compile. The next step is, if you're going to install an integrated development environment or IDE, now your compiler is all set up and you can proceed with that step. In this video, we're going to configure the CodeLight IDE that we just installed to work on our Windows system with C++. So the first thing we want to do is we want to start CodeLight. So I'm just going to double click on the icon. And the first time that you run CodeLight, you'll probably get a little setup wizard pop up. And here it is. You may also get a window that says you want to update to the latest version, which you can certainly do. I'm going to cancel for this video. And here's the setup wizard. Now, it's important that you run through this setup wizard. If this does not show up for the first time, you can always find it up here. You can select Help, and then you can run the setup wizard here. But in this case, it does show up. So I'm going to go through this, and you only have to do this one time. I'm going to select Next. Now here, the way that CodeLight works is it uses a lot of plugins to support PHP, C, C++, and so forth. We only care about C++ in this case. So what we want to do is we want to clear these plugins. So you can see all the check marks are gone. And then we want to toggle the C++ plugins only. So I'm going to select that until only the C++ ones show up. Okay, so that's what we need to do. Just make sure that not all of them are set up, just some of them. You can use the toggle to do it. I'll select Next. Now we want to set up the compiler. Now, remember, if you've already installed the min.gw compiler, then you can just click Scan. If you haven't, go back to the video and install it. I wouldn't install it from this option because it installs an older version of the min.gw compiler. Yeah. So I'm going to Scan, and it should find it. There it is. So I want to select it and press Next. Now here you can customize the colors to whatever you like. This dark Monokai theme is kind of nice on the vision. It's not so hard on your eyes. But for the video, I'm going to choose the classic Eclipse look. That way I think it shows up a little better on video. So I'll select Next. We'll leave these defaults as is, and we'll press Finish. Okay. Now at this point, you want to save and exit. It's going to ask you this every time you make a change, and it gets pretty annoying. So I'm just going to say, remember my answer and don't ask me again. And every time I make a change, I want to save and exit. So I'll save and exit. Okay, so it saves it and it opens it up again, and now the settings that I set were applied. And again, I'll cancel the new download here. Okay, so let me make this full screen here. And as I mentioned before, if that setup wizard does not show up, you can start it here. Run the setup wizard. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create a new workspace. And once we create the new workspace, we'll have a couple settings to do, and then once that's done, it'll be all set. So let's create a new workspace. A workspace is basically an area where you can have different C++ projects in. So the first thing we want to do is create a new workspace. I'll select that. You can also say File, New Workspace. Okay, so I'll do it right here. And it's going to ask me for the name of the workspace. So I'll just say CPP Workspace. You could do this whatever you like. If you want to have a workspace for all the Section 1 exercises, Section 2, Section 3, or whatever you like, whatever makes sense for you. I'm going to put it in my Documents folder, and I want to create the workspace under a separate directory. That just helps me organize my files. I'll select OK. Good. Now you can see here on the left pane on my workspace view, I've got a workspace. Now the workspace in and of itself isn't real useful. I need to create a project within the workspace. So I can right click on workspace and say New Project. So I'll do that and I'll select New Project. At this point, we've got some options. We're going to select the console option and then Simple Executable G++. That's basically the C++ compiler. It's called G++ because it's from GNU. So I'll select that, next. And then you give your project a name. This could be, again, any name you like. Avoid spaces just to be safe, just simple name. So I'll say test1, let's say. And again, I want to create a project in a separate directory. I'll press next. Here you can choose the compiler. It's probably already chosen it for you. If you've got multiple compilers, you can set individual compilers on a per project level. But we're using the MinGW compiler, and we're using the GNU debugger. The build system will be default, and select Finish. So it's gone off and created a new project. You can see it here on the left side. It's called Test1. And as I explode these, you can see that there's my main CPP file. That's the program that it's created for me by default. The .cpp extension means that it's a C++ file. I'm going to double click on that. And you can see my font is pretty small here because I just installed this. Let me increase my font. You may not have to do this on your end, but it's going to show up better on video if I do it. So I'm going to go to Settings, Colors and Fonts, and I'll just set it to 16. I think should be nice. Apply, okay. There we go. That way it's much easier for you to see. Now what we want to do is we want to delete all this. This is actually C code, not C++ code. So let's delete all that and let's write a real simple test from scratch. So the first thing we'll do is we'll include IO stream. This allows us to do input and output. And we'll talk much more about what these include directives mean in a future video. In this example, just type along and make sure that the environment is working. So you want to say #include and IO stream in angle brackets. Then we want to say int space main. This is our main function. 2 parens. And we'll create a couple of curly braces. And then in here, all we're going to say is std : cout, the insertion operator, which is 2 less than signs, followed by hello testing, or anything you like, and then a semicolon at the end, and then finally return 0. That's it. That's a simple test. Again, there'll be a separate video where I go over the anatomy of a C++ program, and we'll go over all this in detail. So in this case, again, we're including IO stream. We've got our main function, and we're printing hello testing to the screen. We're returning 0, which means program successful. Okay, I'm going to save this, and I'm not going to do this on the videos, but you can certainly do this at home. If you come up to View, and you can toggle the minimal view, when you do that, you'll get some icons up here. You can use these icons to build and save. For example, that's the save right there. I'm not going to do that because I want as much screen real estate as possible on the videos. So I'll just toggle that off. Okay, so I'm going to File, Save. And at this point, we're ready to run the program, but we need to make a couple of changes just because we want to use modern C++. So what we can do is we can click on the project, Test1 in this example, and I'll right click, and down at the bottom you'll see Settings. So we'll select Settings, and you can see right down here at the bottom where it says Global Settings, I want to select that. And where it says C++ compiler options, you can click right in there, and then you'll see these three little dots here on the button. So it gives us another menu. So you can select that. And we want to make sure that a couple of things are set. We want to be sure that C++ 14 is checked. That means we're using the latest version of the standard, which is modern C++. We also want to be sure that the WALL, all warnings, is checked. Okay, so that's it for now. That'll be fine. We'll select OK. And we'll apply and OK. Perfect. Okay. Now, I also want to click on the workspace itself and right click on that and come down to workspace settings and select that. And when you come to code completion, you want to be sure that C++ 14 standard is enabled. Okay. Code completion is something that the IDE does. As you type, it's trying to figure out what you want to do and help you out so you don't have to do a lot of typing. And in this case, we want to tell it to use the C++ 14 standard when it's trying to figure things out. So I'll select OK. Now at this point, we should be ready to try this out. So I'm going to expand this little window down here at the bottom, and I'm going to come up to where it says Build, and then we'll select Clean Project. And then we'll go back to Build and just say Run. At this point, it's going to say, what do you want to do? Do you just want to run it, or you want to build it and run it? In this case, I want to build it and run it. And I'll talk more about the workflow that's used for cleaning and compiling and so forth a little bit later on in the course. So in this case, I want to say Build and Execute, and it will compile and run the program. If there are no errors, it'll run and you'll get a window pop up with the output hello testing in there. If there are errors, let me show you what they might look like just in case you do see them. Suppose I forget that semicolon at the end there. And I'm going to say build, run, build and execute. And you can see this red down here that says error expected a semicolon before the return. You also get a red error here. And it says, again, semicolon expected. So basically, you just put the semicolon in there, save it, and then go back up to build and run. Build and execute. You can click on here for it to remember to always build and execute or just execute. Again, don't do that yet. We'll do that as the course progresses, and I'll show you the different workflows we can use. So build and execute. There we go. Now, if at this point you get an error that says that some DLL can't be found, then what you want to do is you want to go back to the project, right click, and go down to settings. And remember, you only have to do this if you get some kind of runtime error that says some CPP DLL file is not found. And go to global settings. And then what you want to do is you want to go to the linker options and just select right on there and click that little button. And down here at the bottom, what you want to do is you just want to add a couple of lines. You could say dash static dash lib gcc, and then press enter, and that dash static dash lib std c++. Okay, so what will happen here is now the linker is going to statically link the files and not have to use dynamically linked libraries or DLLs. Again, you only have to do this if you get that error. If you don't get the error, you can do it also, and it's not going to hurt. But I'll select OK, apply, and let's do a build, rebuild. Let's do a clean first. Whenever you change any kind of settings, you want to clean the project, which really just cleans everything up and gives you a starting place. So we'll clean the project, and then we'll just say run, build, and execute. In this case, it's going to statically link it, which is just as good. And hello testing, we're all set. At this point, we've got a good install, it's configured, and we're ready to use CodeLight to start learning C++. In this video, we'll go over the steps necessary to install the command line tools, which includes the C++ compiler on the Mac OS X platform. In order to do this, we need to have a terminal window. So let's go over to Spotlight Search and type in terminal, and we'll get a terminal window running. At this point, we want to type xcode-select --install and press enter. If you get a dialog box that pops up, as I do, that means that the command line tools and the compiler are not currently installed. If you get a message saying that they are currently installed, then you're done. You can move on to installing the integrated development environment. In this case, I have the choice of installing the full Xcode integrated development environment or simply install the command line tools. I'm only going to install the command line tools, which again includes the compiler. So I'll select Install. I'll agree to the license agreement. And the software will be downloaded and installed. It's a pretty quick process. After a few minutes, you'll see a message saying the software was installed and the installation is complete. You can test out the installation by simply typing G++ -- version at the terminal. And you'll see the version number of the C++ compiler, which means it's all set and good to go. At this point, you'll keep the command line tools up to date through the App Store. So you could select App Store, Updates, and you can see your command line tool updates will appear here. Right now I've got no updates available because I just installed the latest. That's it. We've installed the command line tools. Our compilers are all set up and we're good to go. The next step is to install the integrated development environment. Now that we've downloaded and installed the command line tools and the C++ compiler, we'll now install the CodeLite IDE. CodeLite is an integrated development environment that's cross-platform, open source. It runs on Mac OS X, Linux, and Windows. In this video, we're going to install it on Mac OS X. So open up your favorite browser and go to codelite.org. That's codelite.org. And you'll see a web page similar to this. You want to find the download link. You can see one here at the top bar menu, and there's also this big blue button, which is the one I'm going to click on. I'll select that, and it takes you to a page where you can contribute to the developers if you wish, or you could just go straight to the downloads, and I'll do that. So I'll select right here, Not Now, take me to the download. Now here we've got some options we can install for Windows, for Mac, for Linux, and so forth. We're interested in Mac in this example. So the third one down says CodeLite 11.0 app bundle for OS X. That's the one I want. And I'm going to select the direct link to begin the download. The file is not very large, but the download's quite slow from this site. I'll pause the video while the download occurs. Once the download is complete, you can see that it's downloaded a compressed archive file. So what I'll do is I'll open that, and I'll double click on it to uncompress it. There's my CodeLite app, which I just dragged to my applications folder. That's it. CodeLite's now on our system. In the next video, we'll run CodeLite and configure it to use C++ compilers on Mac OS X. In this video, we'll run and configure CodeLite on Mac OS X. Now, we've already installed the compiler tools and we've installed CodeLite. So let's run CodeLite. We'll come up to Spotlight Search and type CodeLite and double click on the icon. We'll allow it to run. Now, the first time that CodeLite runs, a couple of things will happen. You'll get this small CodeLite window show up, and then you'll get a setup wizard. We can just leave that window small. We'll make it larger in a minute. It's not really going to get in our way right now. What's important is that we run this setup wizard. If the setup wizard does not start, come up to CodeLite's menu and go up to Help, and then run the setup wizard and run it manually. Okay, but here in this case it did pop up, so let's select Next. CodeLite uses a bunch of plugins to allow support for PHP and Node and other technologies. We don't really want all that. We only want the C++ plugins. The rest are just going to clutter up our interface. So what we can do here is we can press clear and then just toggle the C++ plugins. That way only some of these will show up, which is exactly what we want. We just want to concentrate on C++. Select Next. Now we can scan our computer for any installed compilers. We can press this button here, and you can see it's found GCC, Clang, and across GCC. We're going to use GCC.
They're really the same, but we'll use GCC here and press next. Now the customization of the theme is really up to you. This is your personal preference. The Monakai dark theme is real nice and easy on the eyes, but it doesn't show up too well on video. So I'm going to select the classic Eclipse theme and select next. We'll keep these defaults and press finish. Now what we can do here is we can say save and exit. You want to be sure that you save so we can save the changes we've made. And we can run CodeLight again. Okay, so this time I'm going to make this window nice and big. And we've got a couple of options that we still need to configure. But before we do that, we need to create a workspace. You can create a workspace by clicking this button here, or by coming up to File, New, Workspace. Either place works fine. A workplace is just an area where we can have our C++ projects. So we can have multiple projects in a workspace. So I'm going to select New Workspace. And the workspace name could be anything you like. I'm going to say CPP Workspace. Don't use any spaces here, just keep it all together. And I want to create the workspace under a separate directory so I can keep my files organized. I'll select OK. And you can see that it's created the workspace over here on the left pane. Now we need to create a C++ project. So you can right click on that and select New Project. Or you can select the workspace and then come up to File, New Project. Either way. Now we've got some options. We're going to create console project and simple executable G++ right here. And that's the compiler we're going to use. And we'll select next. The project name, again, don't use any spaces here, just create your name, the name for your project, whatever you'd like. I'm going to create a separate directory for each project, and I'll select next. As far as the compiler, we want to use the GCC compiler, but the debugger, we don't want to use the GNU debugger, we want to use the LLDB debugger. That's the Apple debugger. We'll select Finish, and you can see over here on the left that we've created a project called Test1, and it's got a source directory, and it's got a file there called main CPP. Now, before we run that file, there's a couple of things that we need to set up. First, click on the project, in this case Test1, right-click, and then come down to Settings, and select that. Then down here toward the bottom where you see Global Settings, come up to Compiler Options, and select the right side, and then you'll see this little button right here with the 3 dots. Select that, and what we want to do here is we want to check a couple of options. I'm going to scroll all the way up, and I want to select Enable All Compiler Warnings, WAL, and I want to enable C++ 14 features. That's the latest standard, that's modern C++. I want to make sure that that's enabled. And this guy doesn't come on, but you can see that it is there. Sometimes it doesn't check on. You can see that the command line is correct. So just click OK. I'll apply and click OK. Perfect. Now go to the workspace, select it, right click on it, and come down to Workspace Settings. And you'll see we have Environment and Code Completion. Select Code Completion and check the Enable C++ 14 standard. The integrated development environments use code completion. They try to figure out what you're typing and what you want to do and where you want to go, and really help you out with suggestions. In this case, we're simply telling CodeLight to use the C++ 14 standard for those suggestions. I'll click OK, and that's it for the setup. Now let's modify this C++ file and run it. Let's double click on that, and that font is really small, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little larger so it shows up better on the video. Most likely you won't have to touch it at all, but I'm just going to come to Settings, Colors and Fonts, and I'll set the font to, let's say, 18. And I'll apply that, and that should be much more readable. Okay, so now let's modify this file. This is actually C code, not C++ code, so let's get rid of all this. And we'll type a simple C++ program that'll test our installation. During this course, I will go in detail through the anatomy of a C++ program, and everything that I'll be typing here will be explained. But for now, just follow along, type along to make sure we've got a clean install. So the first thing we want to do is we want to type #include, and we want to put IOStream in angle brackets and press enter. Then int space main, left paren, right paren. Then we want to open up a left curly, and you can see that the IDE has closed it for me. And then what I want to do here is I just want to say std, 2 colons, side by side, no spaces, and then cout, the insertion operator, which is 2 less than signs, again, together with no spaces. And anything you want to type here as far as hello, testing. We want to type a string inside double quotes and a semicolon at the end. And then the next line will be return 0. That's it. That's the entire program. When we run this program, what we want to do is we want to display hello testing to the console. That's all it's going to do. I'll save this under Save File. At this point, on your end, you may want to do View, toggle Minimal View, and that'll display, let me do that again. That'll display some buttons and things up here, which you might find useful. I'm not going to do that because it clutters up the screen, and I don't want any distractions when I'm teaching the class, so I'll toggle that away. And what I'll do is, rather than click on the buttons, I'll be really explicit as to, let's click on build, run, build, clean, and so forth. That way you can see exactly what's going on. Once you get familiar with the IDE, you can use those buttons. That's it. So I've saved it. Now I want to run this. First thing I want to do is I want to go to build and clean the project. When we clean a project, we're basically just wiping out everything that's been done in the past except the source code. So the project is in a state that's ready to go. So I'm just going to clean it. And then I'm going to come back up to build, and I'm going to say run. Now it's going to give me an option that says, would you like to build the active project before executing it? Of course I do, because I haven't built it yet in this case. So I'm going to select build and execute, and that will compile the program and open up a window, and there's the output right there. Hello testing. So this terminal window is running the program that I just wrote. That's it. It's as simple as that. Some things could go wrong though. Suppose that you forgot this semicolon here, and I'll save it, and then I'll do the same. I'll do run, build and execute. And you can see if I move this window just slightly up, you can see that I've got a compiler error. And this is what compiler errors look like. You see the red text here, and it says error expected a semicolon after an expression. Also, you'll see that little red arrow right here telling you that there's something wrong here. And basically what you need to do is put a semicolon there. Just type the program really carefully, exactly like I did, and you won't have any problems. But you know, you could have things missing like this. Quote, this first quote is missing. You might have 3 less than signs. There's all kinds of little things that could go wrong with the program. But if you just be very careful, type it in, save it, and come back up to build and run, build and execute. And you can click on there if you like. That way you don't have to keep doing it all the time. And there's the run. That's it. We're all set on Mac. We've installed the command line tools. We've installed CodeLight. We've configured CodeLight, and we're good to go. Now let's start learning C++. In this video, we'll be installing the CodeLight IDE, or Integrated Development Environment, on the Ubuntu Linux platform. CodeLight is a free open source cross-platform IDE that works with C++, and it works across Windows, Linux, as well as Mac. So we'll start by opening up your favorite browser and going to CodeLight, that's CodeLite.org, and you'll get a web page similar to this, and you want to find the download link. Now, there's one at the top menu, and there's also this big blue button here. That's the one I'm going to use. So I'm just going to select CodeLight to download. And you can give a contribution to the developers if you wish, or you can go straight to the downloads, which is what I'll do here. Now we're going to download CodeLight 11.0, which is a stable release. and we're going to download this for Ubuntu. Now you can see here you've got a Windows installer, an OS 10 installer, and so forth. And you can refer to those videos if that's the platform you're on, but this specific video is for Ubuntu Linux. So you can see here it says set up CodeLight repository for Ubuntu. That's the one I'm going to select. A word of caution, these commands are run as super user, as you can see here with the sudo. So be very careful when you type things in. Make sure you're typing things exactly correctly. What I'm doing is I'm not even going to type. I'm simply going to copy and paste. That way I know that I'm making no mistakes. Okay. So first step is to copy this one line right here. And basically what we've got to do, there's a lot of information on this page regarding official and unofficial and so forth. And I'll show you the one that worked great for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this line of code here. Then we're going to copy this line of code here. And the version I've got is Xenial Universe, so that's the one I'm going to, it's 16.0 for Ubuntu, so that's the one I'm going to choose. And then we're going to do a couple more lines and that's it. Now the install takes quite a while. The last time I did this install, it was about 10 minutes, 15 minutes on my machine. So I'm going to pause the video as the install happens. And we're going to do the install in a terminal window. So you can see the terminal window is here. I've opened it up. So I'm going to make this just a little smaller so we can do both at once and you can see what's going on. Okay, perfect. So let's get started. Let's copy this first line right here. And I'm going to copy and paste it over here. Press enter. And it's going to ask you for your password. Obviously, you have to have root access or be super user to install this code. So I'm going to press enter. And that takes care of the first line. Now I'm going to scroll down and get the second line. Now make sure that you replace this string here with the correct distribution of your Ubuntu. Mine is Xenial, so that's the one I'm going to use. I'm going to copy this just like that. I'll paste it. This time it won't ask me for my password. Then I'll go down to the third line, which is the update. I'll copy that and paste it as well. And that'll just take us a few minutes. Okay, that's done. Now the last line is the one that takes a long time to install, so I'm going to copy, I'll paste, I'll press enter, and I'll go have a cup of coffee in a little bit. It says here, after this operation, we need 451 megabytes of disk space. I've got plenty of disk space, so that's fine. And I'll just say continue, yes. And I'll pause the video now and be back in about 10 minutes. At this point, CodeLight has now been installed. In the next video, we'll run it and configure it. Now that CodeLight is installed, we need to run it, configure it, and then run a little test program to make sure our configuration is correct. So the first thing we want to do is we want to find CodeLight, and you can just type code in the search and you'll find CodeLight, and double click. Now the first time it runs, you may get a small window like this, and it's probably a good idea just to make it a little larger. Okay, now, sometimes when you run it the first time, you'll get a setup wizard that runs. Sometimes you don't. We'd like to run the setup wizard. So if it doesn't show up, you can go to Help, Run the Setup Wizard, and select that. And you get a window that pops up. So I'll select Next. Now here, CodeLight supports PHP and Node and a few other technologies. We really don't want all that clutter on our IDE. We want to strictly concentrate on C++. So I would suggest that we clear all the plugins and then turn on only the C++ plugins. So you can see now that not everything is checked. Only the C++ plugins are checked. And we'll select Next. Now we'll scan our computer for any installed compilers. So we'll scan the computer and it's found GCC and cross GCC. I'm going to select GCC. GCC stands for the GNU Compiler Collection, which includes C, C++, Fortran Ada, and a few others. I'll select Next. As far as the editor theme, this is really a preference for you. This dark Monokai theme is really easy on the eyes, but it doesn't show up too well on video. So I'm going to select the classic Eclipse look for the videos. You can choose whatever your preference is, and I'll press Next. I'll leave these defaults as is, and press finish. Okay, now sometimes it opens up two windows like you see here. So I want to save and exit, and I want to shut down all the versions that I've got going. I don't know why it does this, but it does it a few times, and I'll save and exit again. All right, so now we're back to normal. Let's try that again. So we'll run CodeLight, and let's make this full screen again. Perfect. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to create a workspace. A workspace is an area where we can have our C++ projects. So we can have many C++ projects in one workspace. We can do that by selecting this button here called New Workspace, or we can go up to File, New Workspace, either place. So I'm going to select this button here. And it's going to ask you for the workspace name. This could be any name you like. I'm going to say CPP Workspace, and I'm going to put this on my desktop. You can store it anywhere you like as long as you remember where it's at. So I'm going to put this on my desktop. I want to create the workspace under a separate directory that'll help me organize my files better, and press OK. That's it. Now we've got a workspace, which you can see here on the left side. I can right click on that now and create a new project. Again, I can also go up File, New Project. So I'll do that. Now we've got some options here as to which template to use to create the project. We're going to stick to the console template, which is just basically a terminal window. And we want G++. That's the C++ compiler. It's called G++ because it's the GNU C++ compiler. I'll select Next. What's my project name? It could be anything you like. Don't use spaces for any of these project names. So I'll just say Test1. And again, I want to create a project in a separate directory under the workspace. So I'll select Next. Now it's going to ask you which compiler do you want to use. You may have a lot of different compilers on your system. Just select the one that you used in the setup wizard and you'll be fine. And these defaults are perfectly fine. We'll select Finish, and that creates a test project under the CPP workspace, and you can see it's created a source directory, and in there it's got a main CPP file. That's our C++ source code, and we'll get to that in a second. We need to do a couple of bits of configuration though before we do anything else. Let's go to our project, Test1 in this case, and we'll right click, and we'll go down to the bottom where it says Settings, and we'll select that, and then we'll go to where it says Compiler Options. And notice I'm in the global settings. That's pretty important. I'm in the global settings, compiler options. And then I'll select these three little dots here on the button. And I want to make sure that W all is selected. That way we always get warnings. And I want to make sure that the C++ standard C++ 14 is selected. That's the latest standard for C++. That'll make sure that we're using the modern C++ compiler. At that point, you can click OK, Apply, OK. Good. Now we can go to our workspace and right click on that and come down to workspace settings. And you'll see environment and code completion. Go to the code completion and select enable C++ 14 standard. The code completion is a tool that the integrated development environment uses that tries to figure out what I'm typing and what I want to type. And it helps predict what I want to do so it can help me so I don't have to type so much, and it can do some checking as it goes. In this case, I'm just telling it to use the modern C++ compiler. I'll select OK. And that's it. Now we can run a simple test program. We'll double click the main CPP file. And this is actually C code, not C++ code. So we'll delete this in a minute, but that font is a little small. So in my case, since I'm doing this on video, I'm going to go to Settings, Colors and Fonts, and I'm just going to set that to about 16. And let's see. That's much better. You should see that much better. Okay, so let's delete all of this. And we'll write a really simple C++ program. As we go through the course, I'll talk about the anatomy of a C++ program, and we'll go into detail as to what everything I'm going to be typing here means. But for now, just type along and let's get a clean run so that we know our environments are set up. So the first thing we want to write is we want to write pound include and IO stream inside angle brackets. Then we'll press enter. Then we'll say int main and open and close parens. Then we'll type a left curly, and the integrated development environment will automatically close that for me. And here, all I want to do is say std 2 colons and cout. Then the insertion operator, which is 2 less than signs with no space in between, and just some string saying hello testing or anything else you like. That has to be in double quotes. And then finally, we'll put a semicolon on the end of that to terminate. And then finally, the last statement will be return 0. That means that the program terminated correctly. That's it. That's our first really simple C++ program. And like I said, in the beginning of the course, I'll go through what all of this means, and we'll go through the anatomy of a C++ program in great detail. I'll save this. Another option you may like is if you come up here to the menu and you say View, and it'll say Toggle Minimal View. And you can see it's put in a bunch of buttons up here. If you like this, this is great because you can run and compile and do all kinds of things just by clicking on a button. I'm not going to use that because I find that's pretty distracting to the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shut that off on my end, but feel free to use it. I'm going to use command keys, and I'll also just come up here and say, build, and that way it's very explicit what I'm doing rather than just clicking on a button. So that's it. So let's run this now. What I'll do is I'll say build. First thing I want to do is I want to clean this project. That way there's no remnants of anything left over. It'll put it into a stable state that's good to go. So I'll clean the project. Any messages will show up down here. Then I'll say build, and I'll just say run. And it's going to ask me, do I just want to run it, or do I want to build it and run it? Well, in this case, I have to build it and run it because I haven't built it yet. So I'll select build and execute. And if all goes well, we'll get a window that pops up that says, hello, testing, exactly what we typed here. Press any key to continue, press enter to continue, which I'm going to press now. The window goes away and we're done. Now, several things could go wrong here. You may have an error in your program. You might have forgotten to type this exactly right. So you may have forgotten the semicolon. In which case, when you go to build and run, you'll see this red line here. That's a compiler error. You'll also see a red arrow over here telling you there's something wrong here. And the compiler's telling you it's expecting a semicolon before the return. So put it in there. Just be really careful. I'll talk about debugging and fixing syntax errors throughout the entire course. But at this point, save it, make sure it's right. Again, be very careful. You may have extra quote marks and the compiler won't like it. You might only have a single less than sign here and it's not going to like it. So just be sure it's exactly like this. Once you've got it set up, build, run, build and execute. There's a clean run and there's my terminal. Okay, so that's it. We're all set to learn C++.
In this video, we'll go over the steps necessary to create our own custom project template. The idea here is that we can create our own project template, so when we create our projects, we can use this template as the starting point. That way we'll have a proper main.cpp file, we'll have all our switches set, we'll have our environment set. All right, so let's get started. First thing you need to do is open up a workspace. I've got a workspace already open. Already created, I should say. I'm going to open it now. I'm going to say open workspace. If you don't have a workspace at all, you could just say file new workspace. So I'll open the workspace that I've got. It's on my desktop and it's called CPP workspace. So I'll open that. And the first thing you want to do is you want to add a project. So you want to right click on your workspace and say new project. Now here you've got the new project wizard. And you've got different examples. You can create GUI applications, console applications. You can have user templates and so forth. What we want to do is we want to use the simple executable G++ template that comes with CodeLight. And we want to tweak that our own way. And then what we want to do is we want to create our own template in here that we can choose. And we could put it in console, or we can put it here in user templates. We could put it wherever we'd like. Okay. But before we do that, we need to create a project. So let's do that. I'm going to select console, and let's use the G++ simple executable console template. I'll press next. The project name, it doesn't really matter. I'll just say sample, since we're going to save it as a template anyway. And I'll select next. We want to make sure our compilers are set up correctly. Here I'm using MinGW and the GDB debugger. I'll select finish. And that creates our project. You can see here's the source file, and here's the CPP file, which is really C code and not C++ code, but we'll fix all this in a minute. So first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of this. And let's write a simple C++ program, the same one we've been writing all along. So we'll say include IOStream. We'll include IOStream since we're going to probably use it in most of the projects that we write. Then we have our main function. And again, it's int main, open, close, parens, and then an open curly, which will be automatically closed by CodeLight. Here we can indent in by just pressing tab, and we could say std, : cout, and then the insertion operator, followed by the string hello world. And you can type anything you like here for hello world. And we'll do also an std, : and endl. This prints a new line. That way when we display hello world, the cursor will go to the next line on the console. And then finally, we'll just return 0 like we always do. That's it. I'm going to save this. So I'm going to press Control S here. So I've just done that and saved it. Now we'll set some compiler settings. We'll do this the one time, and then we'll save it as a project template. So let's go to the sample project, the actual project name, and we'll right click, go down to settings, global settings, and we want to make sure we've got those two compiler options set. So we're going to right click on those three little dots here on the button. You want to select that button and click. And we want to make sure that we've got our all warnings enabled on and our C++ 14 standard on. Press OK. Then you want to come to where it says code completion and select that and select enable C++ 14 standard, apply. And that's it. Now what we can do is we can come to the project again, right click and say save as template. So I'll select that. And what's the project name? This could be anything we want. We could just say Frank template or template for course or any name you like. Rather than that, I'm just going to say Frank, let's see, G++ console template. I think it's pretty picky about spaces, so I'm just going to use those dashes. And it is a console application. If you leave it as console, it'll be in the console group. I'm actually going to change that to user template. And then you can give it a description you want. I'll just say Frank's console template. That's it. I'll select OK. And now we've got a new template that's stored. So if I go back to my workspace and I want to create a new project now, let me close all this up. I'm going to right click and say new project. And now you can go down to your templates and go down to your user templates right here. And you should see that one we just created right here. So we can just select that. Next, I'll just say project 1. Select next. Keep the defaults for the compilers and finish. At this point, you can double click here to make that project the active project. And we'll look at the main CPP. You can see it's the main CPP that we just typed. Also, if you right click on the project and you go down to the settings, you can see code completion is C++ 14 and the global settings have the appropriate compiler flags that we need. That's it. We'll test this real quick. Let's run, build and execute, and hello world. That's it. So now you've got a project, you're all set up. You can create as many of these as you like, tweak the settings as far as you like. It's really up to you to decide what you want to do with the project templates. But for this course, include IOStream, Give yourself a main. You may or may not want this line right here since, you're probably going to get rid of it anyway when we start writing other code. But at a minimum, do something like that. When you create a new project, you'll be ready to start coding.
In this section, we'll look at how we can create, build, and execute C++ programs using only a simple editor and the command line. All we need on our system is a simple text editor. It's important to note that word processors such as Microsoft Word and Apple Pages are not usually used to enter program code. Instead, we use basic text editors or programmer text editors. These types of editors are much simpler than integrated development environments. We also need an installed C++ compiler like GCC or MinGW on Windows and Apple's command line compilers on Mac. That's it. Point. We can create the C++ program using the text editor and compile and run it by typing commands into the command line. This may sound intimidating at first, but it's actually quite easy and efficient. That said, this is a workflow that's more commonly seen with experienced developers. However, you may wish to consider this approach if you find the IDEs too complex or too difficult to understand. You might also consider this approach if your computer hardware resources are insufficient to run an IDE. In any case, this is another option that you may use. In the next several videos, I'll show you how to edit, build, and execute C++ programs using only the command line and a simple editor. There will be separate videos for Windows, Macs, and Ubuntu Linux for your reference.
In this video, we'll use the command line tools to compile and run our C++ programs on the Windows platform. Now, obviously, we need some sort of editor to type in our code. I'm just going to use Notepad, which is built into Windows, and it's really, really easy to use. Couple of things first. I've created a folder on my desktop called CPP Projects. In there, there's another folder called Project 1. Inside Project 1 is where we're going to put our C++ file, our source code. Now, there's nothing in there right now. Okay, I just wanted to show you where I'm going to be putting everything. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I just want to open up Notepad. And as you know, Notepad is just a real simple text editor. And I want to type in my C++ program right into this text editor. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller because I'm going to open up another window in a moment. So let's type in that main program that we should probably know by heart now. So I'm going to say include iostream. Then I'm going to say int main, open and close parentheses, open curly bracket. I'll close the curly bracket at the bottom. Remember, this is not an integrated development environment, so it's not really going to help me with syntax or with, closing open brackets automatically and so forth. I'll indent over a couple of spaces, and I'll say std, 2 colons, cout. 2 less than signs next to each other, which is the insertion operator. And we'll say hello Windows command line. And we'll close the string. Then we can also print a new line at the end. Let's do that. So we'll just say std : endl semicolon. That'll just print a new line. It brings the cursor to the next line in the output. Here we'll say return 0 like we always do. And let me just clean this up a little bit. That's it. We're done. We now need to save that program into that CPP Projects 1 folder that I mentioned a minute ago. At this point, you have to be a little careful because Notepad works with text files. So it's going to use TXT extensions. We don't want TXT extensions. We want CPP extension. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and then I'm going to go to my desktop, my CPP projects, and my Project 1 folder. Now you'll notice here where it says file name star.txt, that's what I don't want. So I want to go to Save as File Type and just say All Files. That gets rid of the extension. And now we could just say main.cpp. That's it. So I'm going to save my file as main.cpp, and I'm going to save. Okay, so if I go to my directory structure now, you'll see I have CPP projects, project 1, and there's my main. Now we need to compile and run this. The way we do that, and I'm going to leave this window open on here on the left for a moment. The way we do that is with a command shell or a command prompt. And all you need to do is just run command. And you'll see where it says command prompt. That's what we want to do. We'll just press enter and run it. And we get this window here, and I'm just going to move it over here on the right. That way it's nice and big. Now you'll notice, first of all, I'm in the wrong directory. I'm in the users Frank directory. I want to be in that folder that I created. So we can use the cd command to change directory. In this case, I want to change directory to desktop and press enter. And now you can see that I'm at the desktop. Then I want to change into CPP projects, and you can press tab and it will autocomplete for you. So I'm going to press tab and it'll say CPP projects. And then I want to go into project 1. There we go. There I am. So if I want to see what's in that folder, I can just type dir for directory listing. And you can see right there is my main CPP. At this point, I want to compile. The way we compile is, let me make this a little bit bigger so the whole line will fit on here. We want to use the C++ compiler, the MinGW C++ compiler that I'm assuming is already installed. We need to have that compiler installed. G++, that's the compiler. Now we need to have those options. -W, capital W, all. That turns your warnings on. Then std equals, -std equals C++ 14. That's using the C++ version 14 standard. And then the file we want to compile, which in this case is main.cpp. That's it. Now, when I do this, if there are no errors, it's going to create an executable file called a.exe. So let's do that. Okay, we got a clean compile. Remember, no news is good news, so no messages, that's a good thing. And we'll do dir again. And you can see right here we have a file called a.exe. That's our executable. I can run it by just typing a. And it says, hello, Windows command line, which is exactly what our program is supposed to do. If you want a different name for the output, we can just put another option on the command line. And what I'm doing here now is I'm pressing the up arrow, and it's going to go back through everything I typed. That way I don't have to type everything again. So you can go up or down using your up and down arrows. So what I'm doing here is same thing. I'm saying call my compiler, turn on all warnings, use the C++ 14 standards, compile this file right here, main CPP, and then you can use the -o, lowercase o, and then the name of the file that you want to create, the executable. So let's say I want main.exe or whatever exe you like. And I'll press enter. And let me clear the screen. You can clear with CLS. And I'll do another directory listing. So now you can see I have an a.exe and a main.exe. And I can simply run main. That's it. This is really, really straightforward. If you have issues with IDEs, if you have issues with hardware resources that you can't run an IDE or just don't like IDEs, you could certainly run C++ programs this way. One thing to remember here, when you type your program into an editor such as Notepad, you may have syntax errors. So the way syntax errors will show up, and let me get rid of that semicolon there. Now, if I just say compile again, notice I got a clean compile. How can that be? I took off a semicolon. That shouldn't compile. I forgot to save it. You've got to be sure to save. One of the things that the IDEs do is they kind of do that automatically for you, so you don't have to think about it. But when you're working in a workflow like this, you've got to be sure that whenever you edit your file, you come up to File Save or Control S. Now you can compile again, and there's your error. So this is the way that you would work in this environment. Obviously, since it's not an integrated development environment, it's not going to get a little arrow here that says red and shows you where the error was, because these things are two separate programs that really aren't talking to one another. But there's the error. You can fix your error. If you make another error, let's say you forgot this quote mark right here. Again, I'm saving the program. I just did a Control S, and I can compile again. And there it says, warning, missing terminating quote character. Okay, you can fix that. I'll save again, and I'll compile one more time. We've got a clean compile. We run main. We get the output. Okay, that's great. So that's pretty much what there is to it. It's not a big deal. Obviously, if you type G++, and this is a normal message right here, fatal error, no input files. It's, it's asking me, what do you want me to compile? You haven't told me what you want. But if you get a program not found error, then go back to the installation video from MinGW that I created and make sure that your path is set correctly, because what's happening is that Windows can't find G++. Okay, so that takes care of Notepad. Now, there's another editor out there, and I'm going to close this real quick. There's another editor that's free. It's called Notepad++, and I've installed it on the system on my computer here. And you can see it's right here, Notepad++, and I'll press Enter. This is a programmer's editor. And let me open the file. I had a previous one open, so I'll open up a new one. Let's see, File, Open, and I want to open that C++ file right here. There we go. So you can see that this is doing syntax highlighting, it's doing code folding, it's got line numbers. This is a programmer's editor, and again, it's called Notepad++. It's absolutely free. You can install it. You can do a Google search and install it on your system. Again, it's not an IDE, but it's a more advanced programmer's editor, which is really, really nice. And it's a lot nicer than Notepad. Notepad was never intended to write code with, but you can certainly write code with it. I'd recommend you use something like Notepad or Brackets or Atom or one of the paid ones like Sublime. There's a lot of really good text editors out there that you can find. Okay, so that wraps up this video. As you can see, if you've got issues with an IDE or if you've got issues with hardware resources, don't let that stop you. You can still learn C++ and you can still get your programs to compile and run really easily.
In this video, we'll go over the steps necessary to write, build, and execute C++ programs from the command line on a Mac. All we really need is a terminal session and an editor. Now, as far as the editor is concerned, there are a bunch of editors out there. Some of them are free, some of them are paid editors. The one I'm going to use in this example is called Atom, A-T-O-M, and you can download it from the internet. And it's absolutely free, and it's a fine text editor. Now, before I do that, I'm going to create a folder on my desktop, and I'm going to call it CPP Projects. And within that folder, I'm going to create another folder called Project 1. And this is where we're going to store our source files. Okay, so now what we need is we need an editor and we need a terminal window. So let's create both of them. First, let's create the terminal session. So we'll go to Spotlight Search and type terminal and press Enter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this terminal over here on the right so that it's right docked just perfectly. And I'm going to run the Atom editor now. Again, you can run any editor you like. And there's the Atom editor, and I'll close down some of these tabs here so that we're here from scratch. Perfect. And again, I'm going to just dock this over here on the left side. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create a file in that folder that we just created. So let's go to File, New File, and it's going to be a C++ file. So I'm going to save this right now so that Atom knows that it's a C++ file. So I'm going to say File, Save As, and I want to put this on my desktop. In my CPP Projects Project 1 folder. And I want to name the file main.cpp. That's it, I'll save it. And now we can start typing our C++ program. It's really straightforward. That simple hello world program is what we're going to write. So we're going to say pound include. And you can see now that we've saved it as a .cpp file, Atom knows that it's C++. So it's going to allow us to, it's going to help us out with the code highlighting and syntax highlighting. So I'm going to include IOStream. Then I'm going to have my main. I'll say int main, open close parens, an open curly, which it completes for me. And now here all I'm going to say is std, 2 colons, cout, then followed by the insertion operator, which is the 2 last stand signs together. And I'll just say any string. I'll just say hello Mac command line. And I'll terminate that string, and then I'll put a new line at the end so that the cursor goes to the next line when we do the output. So that's ENDL. And we'll return 0. That's it. That's the program. We'll save it. Now we need to go over to our terminal to compile and run it. When you open up the terminal, it defaults in your home directory. So you can see if you type pwd, that prints the working directory, which is users followed by your username. That's not where I want to be. I want to be in the desktop folder that we created. So we can use the cd command to change directory. And I'll just type desktop, and you can press tab to autocomplete. So now I'm in the desktop directory. Then I want to go into my CPP projects directory, and finally into my project 1 directory. That's where I'm at. Now, if I want to know what's in there, you can just type ls, which gives you a file listing, and you can see there's main.cpp. That's this file we just created in the editor. What we want to do now is we want to compile this file. So what we want to do is we want to type G++. That's the name of the compiler. That'll execute the compiler. Then we want to provide the compiler the same switches that we did in the IDE. So we'll say dash capital W ALL. So that turns on all warnings. Then we want to write dash std equals C++ 14. That'll tell it to use modern C++, the 14 standard. Now we tell it what files you want to compile. In this case, I only have one, main.cpp. If you have more than one, you would just list them all separated by spaces. But here we've got main.cpp. That's it. That's all you need to do. You press enter. We get no error messages. No news is good news. We'll do an ls again. And you can see that now we've got a new file created called a.out. That's the default executable file's name when you don't provide a name. In order to run this, you just type ./a.out. When I press enter, we should see hello Mac command line. That's exactly what we see. That's this statement right here executing. It's as simple as that. Now, if you don't like the a.out and you want to provide your own file name, you can come up, and what I'm doing here is I'm pressing the up arrow and the down arrow. You can see it's going through what I've typed. So you want to go back to the statement where you ran the compiler and just type a dash lowercase o and whatever name you want your executable to be. And you press enter. And now if we do a directory listing, you can see that main is there. And if you want to run main, ./main. And that's it. We've created a file, a C++ program. We compiled it and we ran it using only the command line, no IDEs. And as I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of editors out there. You can use Atom, Brackets, Text Wrangler, TextMate, Sublime, and there's a bunch much more. You can just do a search on Google and you can come up with a bunch of examples of text editors. Okay, so let's talk about compiler errors now. I'm going to clear the screen here, and I can do that in the terminal by just typing clear. And let's get rid of that semicolon at the end here. Now, if I run the compiler again, you can see I got a clean compile. That makes no sense because I created an error here by removing the semicolon. Well, the issue is that I never saved this file. When you work with the IDEs sync everything up. So they realize that your source code has changed, so they're going to compile the latest version of it. Here, these two are two separate programs and they're not synced. You're the person that has to sync them together by making sure you save it. So in this case, I'm going to come over here and do File Save or Command S. Now when I come back here and compile again, I'll see the error, which says I'm missing a semicolon. So I'll add that semicolon. Okay. If I put a semicolon in here at the end of IOStream, which I should not have, I'll save it, and then I'll go and compile it again. You can see there's an extra token at the end of the line. It's complaining about it. So I can go back here, Command S again to save, and I can recompile. This time I'll get a clean compile, and I can run my main. That's it. It's as simple as that. If you don't have the resources to run an IDE, or you don't like the IDE, or you feel the IDE is confusing you and not really allowing you to focus on the C++, this is a great alternative. Pretty easy, pretty fast, and you'll be in business real quick.
In this video, we'll go over the steps necessary to create, build, and run a C++ program on Ubuntu Linux using only a text editor in the command line. So in this video, we won't be using any integrated development environment. First of all, I've created a folder on my desktop called CPP Projects. And in that folder, I've created another folder called Project 1. This is where we're going to store our C++ program. In this case, it's just going to be a main, a real simple test. So I'd like to close this up. And the first thing we need to do is we need some sort of editor to type in our program. Now on Linux, we've got gedit. So I could just come to search my computer and type gedit. And we can use that text editor, which is a fine text editor. It's real simple. It comes with your installation. There are many other text editors and programmer text editors that you can use, like Brackets, Atom, and many others. But this one is already here, so we may as well use it, and it works just fine. I've gone ahead and gone to Edit Preferences, and I just turned on line numbers, and you can set all kinds of different settings that you like. I made the font also a little bigger so you could see it. So it may look a little different when you start yours. So the first thing we want to do is we want to write this C++ program. So let's do include IOStream, just like we've done before. I'll leave a space, and then I'll say int main, 2 parentheses, the open curly, and I'll close the curly while I'm at it. And now we'll just say, we could just press tab, we'll say std, 2 colons, cout, the insertion operator, which is the 2 less than signs, right together with no spaces. And I'll say, hello, Ubuntu command line. We'll close the string. We'll put another insertion operator, and let's put a new line at the end. That way our cursor will go to the next line when we do the output. And that's ENDL followed by a semicolon. And then we return 0, just like we always do. That's it. That's our C++ program. Now, it's important that we save this with the .cpp extension and not a txt extension. The C++ compiler does not like txt extensions, and you're going to get all kinds of weird errors. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go to File, Save As. We'll find where we want to save it. We want to save it to our desktop, CPP Projects, Project 1. That's where we would like to save it, and I'll give it the name as main.cpp. Now you'll notice a couple of things. When I name the file CPP, the editor is smart, so it realizes that this is not a regular text file, it's a C++ text file. So I'll save it. And notice what happened here. Notice the color coding, it knows C++. Again, it's not an integrated development environment, so it doesn't have a lot of hooks to the compiler and so forth. But you can see that now it's really helping me because I can see that my string is terminated. For example, if I get rid of that guy, then that's black, and it shouldn't be black. It should be a magenta color. Right. So again, I'm going to press Control S to save that file. Now we'd like to compile and run it. So in order to do that, we need to open up a terminal. So I'll come back up here, and I'll say terminal. And that'll open up a terminal, which I'll pull down just right by here so we can run them together. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that if you do a PWD, which prints your working directory, I'm in home frank. I don't want to be in home frank. I want to be in this directory right up here that you can see desktop CPP projects project 1. So I need to change into that directory. We can use a CD command to change directories. So I want to go to my desktop, and you can press tab for completion, auto completion, and press enter. Then I want to type CD CPP projects. And then finally, project 1. And you could do this all in one line if you like. I just did it in 3 steps. So now I'm in the correct directory. If I want to know what's in that directory, I could just type ls, which gives me a listing of the directory. And you can see that my main CPP file is there. That's the one that I want to compile. So let me make this thing a little bit wider just so you can see what I'm typing here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to execute the compiler. So I want to say G++. That calls the compiler. That's the GNU C++ compiler. And I want to set some options. These are the same options that we would set with the IDE. Here, we're just going to set them as switches right on the command line. So I want to say capital W, ALL. That turns on all warnings. Then I want to say dash STD equals C++ 14. That's going to use the 2014 C++ standard, which is the latest one that's out there. Now we supply, what do you want to compile? Well, I want to compile the main.cpp file. Main.cpp. That's it. So it's going to execute the compiler, turn on all warnings, use the latest standard, and compile that one file, main.cpp. I'll press enter. I got back no messages, which is good. As they say, no news is good news. If you have errors, it'll tell you. If you don't, it'll be nice and quiet. At this point, I'll do an ls again to see what's in our directory. And you can see that it's created a file called a.out. That's the common normal file, executable file that's created when you don't say, hey, create main or create some other name. To run it, you just type ./a.out. And there you go. It says, hello, Ubuntu command line, exactly what we typed up here in our program. If you don't want the a.out and you want your own executable, then you can type that in, and I'll show you how to do that. What I'm doing now is I'm pressing the up arrow and the down arrow, and you can go through what you've typed in. That way you don't have to type it all in again. So you want to go back to the statement where you compiled and just type a dash lowercase o and the name of the file that you want to create. So in this case, let's just say main. That'll be my executable. I'll press enter. I'll do ls again. Now you can see that there's a main file right there, and I can now run main. And I get the same output. Okay, simple as that. It really is very straightforward. Now, one of the things that you have to keep in mind, since this is not an IDE, you've got two things going on here separately, right? You've got your editor here and your command line tool here. They're not really synced together. You're the one that's syncing them together. So if I remove this semicolon from my text editor and I compile again, I expect an error, right? I didn't get an error. The reason I didn't get the error was because I never saved the file. You have to be sure to save the file and then compile. The IDE sort of handle that magically behind the scenes. They realize that you've made a change, so it's going to compile the latest changes you made. This is different since they're not in sync. So you want to be sure that you can come up here and say File Save or Control S. Now I've saved it. Now I compile. Now I see the error. So you can see the error is it's expecting a semicolon, which I can replace. If I get rid of this quote mark and Control S, I'm saving again. Now I run. Now I'm going to get a different error, something about a terminating quote character is missing. So I can put that back in, Control S and save, and compile again. And we can run main one more time. That's it. So that's it. It's pretty straightforward. These are the steps necessary when you have a plain text editor and the command line. If you cannot install an IDE for some reason, maybe you've got minimal hardware requirements, or you just don't like IDEs, or you find them too confusing, don't let that stop you from learning C++. You can still use a simple text editor like this and a command line tool, and you can see the command. You can see the command right there. It's really, really straightforward. If you've got multiple C++ files, which we will later on in the course, you just type them all in here. File 1.cpp, file 2.cpp, and so forth. It'll compile everything, link everything, and run it for you. Many times, if you're a consultant and you're working out there, you'll show up at a place and there's no IDE. You're working as a consultant. All you need is an editor and a command line, and you're in business. Okay, so that wraps up this video. In this video, I'll show you a couple of options that allow you to run your C++ programs right in a web browser. Now, this is pretty nice because sometimes you're on the road, you don't have your computer with you, and you want to take the course and try out some examples. Or maybe you had an idea about an example, you want to try it out, but nothing's available. Or at your friend's house and there's no computer available there except a browser. All you need is a browser to run these. One example is if you open up your favorite browser, I'm using Chrome here, you can type in cpp.sh, that's the URL, and you get the C++ shell. Now, both of these examples I'm going to show you are rather limited compared to obviously running on your own computer with an IDE and so forth. But they're really, really handy when you need to try something out really quickly without having to install a thing. So in this case, cpp.sh is the C++ shell. You can type your program right in here on the browser. And you can see here I've typed in the Hello World program. And you can set options. You can set your C++ 14 options, your warnings to a W all like we have in the examples. And if you want to run your program, you could just select run, and it's going to compile and run it at the same time, which is pretty nice. Also, if the program asks for input, which we'll get to a little bit later in the course, you can set that to interactive mode, so you'll be able to type into the program, which is kind of nice as well. So in this case, I want to run the program, and you can see it's compiling, program is running, and the output is hello world right here, and the exit code is 0, which is our return 0. That's pretty nice. Now, you can get a URL, which gets a URL to what you did, and you can click on that URL and you get the program that you wrote back. So that's obviously it's storing it somewhere. I'm not sure where or how long it's going to be available, but you can figure that out if you like. That's one example. Another example is webcompiler.cloudapp.net. This is a Visual C++ compiler running in the web. It's a Microsoft compiler. And you can see that they've given you a sample program here. Now this text is pretty small. Again, it's a browser, so I'm going to make my browser a little bit bigger so you can see it, and then I'll make it a little smaller again to run it. So you can see here it's including IOStream. It's using a namespace, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And it's outputting hello world. And let me make this a little smaller again. So when you run the program by clicking this purple button down here, there's your output right up here in this black window here, hello world, which is pretty nice. And you can set your compiler flags however you like. So in this case, I'm setting the warnings to all, and I'm setting my standard compiler to C++ 14. I'll close that down. And so as you can see, this is pretty nice option here. We can, if we get a compiler error, let's say we forget that semicolon and we run, then the compiler error shows up down here. It says in function main on line 7 right here. There's a semicolon expected. You actually get a little red little X there that tells you the error is right around here somewhere. So you can fix your error and run it again. And there you go. There's your hello world. So again, these are some web-based options. They're not perfect. You can't really save things and edit and do all kinds of good stuff, but you can run a lot of the programs that we're going to talk about in this class right in the C++ shell on the web.